How do you live a life that is significant without striving, meaningful in the mundane, and overcomes in spite of obstacles? Welcome to The Conversation, the Significant Life podcast with Jen and Marcus Jones.
Hello, and welcome to the Significant Life podcast. We are so glad that you are listening in today, and we really have, I think, a hot conversation, a meaningful conversation.
Hot topic coming your way.
Topic, and something that I am very passionate about, and I know it's a risk. I know it's risky, me coming on here and talking around the idea of race and white privilege and how that impacts the next generation, how that's impacting our schools, how it's impacted our churches. And I recently was having a moment. I think it was after we had toured some colleges with one of our daughters in the South, and the awareness came to her when we were in a southern state looking at these colleges, and she's like, "Mom, where are the brown people?" Because living in San Diego and being at a school pretty central in the city, she's used to a lot of color in her circle, on her fields, in her classrooms, and her clubs. It's like that's just the norm for her community. And it really did open a conversation about, they're here. They just aren't necessarily, it's a little more segregated. And it kind of rocked me. And upon arriving home from that, I called my friend Courtney because I really wanted to ask more questions, become more aware, and hear from her what I could do and how I could make a difference. So we would love to introduce you to our dear friend, someone that I have now had in my life for, I think, since 2005, maybe. I mean,
it's been about 20 years.
20 years that we have been friends. And so we no longer get to
I had hair when we first met.
Listen, you had that little thing right here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to bring that back.
Please don't.
Oh, come on. I'm going to do it.
As your friend, I'm saying.
But you know what? Okay, so if you have been with us here, we're here in season 2 of Significant Life podcast. You know, from being a part of so many of the conversations, we've kind of tipped our hand of where we're coming from, in that we are passionate believers that every single person created by God has intrinsic worth and value, and that we have been given just this earmark, this stamp of wonder from our Creator. And we believe that passionately, while at the same time we recognize that that's not how a lot of us walking the planet treat one another.
Right.
And so there's so much going on in our world. We don't have to recount all the ways. There's a ton of history going on. And so in this conversation, as we talk with one of our dearest friends, Courtney, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you, because you are amazing. Just so you know, like we did meet Courtney when she was in college. Was a part of a group in our home, and along the way we've worked together, we've planted churches together, we have done a ton of living and a ton of life together, in ups and downs and every twist and turn along the way in this life's path. And suffice it to say, I know Jen feels the same way. We deeply admire you and your walk with God, your perspective on things, and so thank you for being here, just to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you.
I think because we know each other so well and we're deep, we sort of jumped in with a deep dive. But before we totally go there on this combo, maybe you could tell everybody just a little bit about you and where you're coming from.
Well, like I said, I've known them for close to 20 years. I currently live in Houston. I have a 9-year-old. He'll be 10 in a couple weeks.
Wow.
A 10-year-old boy named Jeremiah. I've been married to my husband for 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And we just living up here in the dog's mouth of Houston because it's hot and moist. Disgusting.
Yeah.
Didn't recommend it.
Well, Callie misses you.
I miss it so much every day. Every day.
Yeah.
I tell Clinton, I was like, I'm going to end up back there. You can come if you want to, but
Going back.
My guess is he's coming. If you're going, he's coming.
And your boy, I
Yeah.
remember when you were pregnant with him and the
Yep.
miraculous entry he made into this world,
Yeah.
defying all odds, and also bouncing a basketball.
Yeah.
And he's still doing. He's still doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've actually ever seen Jeremiah without a basketball. Boy, is it.
Listen,
You have the best. You have the best parent hashtag on Instagram for your pictures of him too. It always follows with the little hashtag Jeremiah my joy.
Yeah.
I have always
He
remembered
is
that. Such a great
my
hashtag.
baby.
I love it.
So good. So good. Okay. Well, let's go there.
Let's do it.
I got questions. So, Marcus, you want to kind of kick us off?
Yeah. So, there's been obviously a lot in recent years. It's been even more amplified, and I think front of mind. But clearly, the conversation around race just continues to be the perpetual wrestle for so many folks. Not only the conversation, but I mean, more importantly, the living out day-to-day application of what that means in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we wanted to have a conversation around the sense of perspective, because none of us know everything, right? There's tons that we don't have experience with, or we're not exposed to. We don't have a perspective on, because that's not been our path. Yet we all have opinions about stuff. And so when our opinion collides with someone else's experience and they don't go together, or they're in conflict, sparks fly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, clearly, Courtney, we're not setting you up as the paragon of perspective of every person of color, but you are an expert on your own experience.
Correct.
And can you talk a little bit about how this has impacted you, even in recent years, but zoom out as much as you want, to give us a sense of the world that you feel like you are living in,
Mm-hmm.
and describe that a little bit for us.
Like I said, I'm 37 years old, and I've walked through this world, and every day I'm aware of the color of my skin. I grew up in the South, and I have a stepfather. He's a white guy, and I went through where his extended family didn't accept us, wouldn't shake my hand because of the color of my skin. Went through school, a lot of racially divided things happened, but what I'm trying to get at is that I have walked through the world aware of what the world thinks of me, what the view of someone who looks like me is, and I've come across people who don't get that because that's not their experience. And so I love having these conversations, because I like to have conversations with the intent of understanding, not with fighting. I'm not here to say, woe is me, or, you guys owe me this, and well, this was happening. It's just my experience. And so as long as someone's willing to listen and learn, I'm here all day to have these conversations. So
how does it impact you personally? Obviously recent Supreme Court decisions, and, specifically, not necessarily just specifically about college admission, but just, when you have something come across the table, whether it's, affirmative action or voting rights or whatever it might be, how given your experience and how you have had to encounter the world, how do those things impact you?
It honestly breaks my heart. I feel like the stories, I grew up knowing my great-grandparents. When Dr. Martin Luther King would come to Tallahassee, they would host him. I've listened and watched how they fought for these rights, for them to be like, well, no more. As if it breaks my heart, because they don't like to acknowledge what this country has done. We like to do sparkles and rainbows, and it's great, and God bless the USA. And I'm not saying the USA is not great, but we have to start with looking at what it was built on. And if we want to just take it away and erase it, it just breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a grievous reaction when I heard the Supreme Court ruling as well.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly my experience is so different from you.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, it really, like, it felt like a punch in the gut. Like, America, no.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait. We cannot go
Mm-hmm.
backwards, which, to your point, you're 37 and you have experienced rejection
Absolutely.
by family because,
Absolutely.
or what's supposed to be family because of the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that long ago. It's not as long ago as we like to think it is. But I did feel like, what in the world, we're going backwards. And my experience is not as a person of color, or even having a person of color like deeply connect to my family, but having a daughter who is different, and who the world, I have actually had to advocate for the world to deem worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to, especially now in her latter year or her next season of life, out of like, as an adult, had to say, like, no, she deserves representation.
Yeah.
She deserves a shot. And she doesn't have some of the same privileges as your 18-year-old daughter, but that doesn't mean she shouldn't get access just because she thinks different and looks different and has different abilities and some disabilities. And so while that is so different than your story and race, I think it was a little bit of a common strand that I was like, oh my gosh, why are we taking away access? Because not all of us are upper class, legacy living people who had all kinds of privilege with really great academics and really awesome socioeconomics, and learn in a way that's going to enable us to just get into the college of our choice. So it was heartbreaking to me for that reason. So tell me this, I don't know, but how do you think that even this conversation and these conversations about race and privilege, including the topic like affirmative action, can shape perspectives and attitudes of the next generation? Because I actually really deeply care to go, like, can we go 1% better instead of like 1% backwards?
Right. And I think it's going to take some work. What I've found is that people often don't want to hear. People don't want to have the conversations. It's the way it is. That's the way it is. And so as long as that attitude is there, you're going to teach that to the next generation. And racism is taught. It's not inherent in someone. And so as long as you're not willing to acknowledge and to learn and to change, I don't see how you can teach someone else differently.
Yeah. We got work to do. You know what, as you were saying that, because I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Which part that it's taught, that's like quite a statement. That
yes, I do agree with that. But you know what isn't taught, that every single person wrestles with, is selfishness. And so much of misaligning or like missing people in these conversations, I think so much of it has to do with how much orientation we have just to our own self.
Yeah.
What's mine? It's like, it's like, what's the first word to come out of a 2-year-old's mouth when they start stumbling around? No and mine. And so much of that can kind of sum up the conversations I feel like so often we have around this topic is no and mine. And it's super troubling, like you said, because there is a ton of responsibility. How do you move a no mine toddler from 2 years old into adulthood? You have to do something different.
Correct.
You have to think about things. There's training involved. There's correction involved.
There's
very
all these
intentional.
Things. It's very
there you go.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So then I would like to ask
Love it.
this, because since it's taught,
Mm-hmm.
um, what steps, like as a parent then, because this is where it's really hitting me hard launching my kids into this next season. I see like just their surroundings and what I've been able to control.
Yep.
The churches that we've attended, the schools that we've attended. I have been intentional. We have actually immersed ourselves into diverse environments because that's a value of our home. But now they're going out of our home and they're experiencing a world that doesn't have that value. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So what? As parents, as caregivers, as people who have influence in the next generation, and even, the current, but let's see what we can do for the next generation.
Yeah.
What can we do to engage in the conversation? Because I think for me, with you, that's what's been so life-giving and transformative, is I always feel safe to come and ask you a question. Also, I'm wired to be like, oh, I'm just going to call Courtney and I'm just going to ask. I know not everyone feels that bold.
Right.
And not everybody has a deep, meaningful relationship with someone who is different from them. That's something they've never even been around a person of color, maybe. So what can we do to spark conversations?
And to your point, though, you're comfortable with that because we have an intentional relationship. And so it takes work, it takes life, it takes love, it takes grace, it takes all of those things. And if you, at some point, someone just has to make a choice to be like, I just want to intentionally get to know someone who is different than I am. And I think with our kids, for me, mine, he's 10, but I've always been, one of the things in my parenting style, I always want to create a safe place to have real conversations. And so being honest and not being afraid to broach the subject, to have grace. When you don't know something, we'll learn together. But I think having open, honest conversations about today, tomorrow, history, and what actually happened. We can't gloss over things because we have to look at the ugly sometimes. You have to look at the ugly in order to learn from it. Because if you don't look at it and if you just ignore it, it's never going to change. And so what I do is just create safe environments to have hard, tough conversations. And so I think that's the way I approach it, as far as with the next generation and my son. And again, I have to raise a son a little differently than you have to raise your son.
Correct. Correct.
And our conversations are a little harder because I have to teach him to honor and love people, no matter what they look like, no matter who they are, but also prepare him for a world that's not going to do the same for him.
One of the things, Courtney, and I want you to speak to this. So one of the things I commonly hear, especially from white people, the pushback that I hear against things like affirmative action or anything that whatever program might have been intended, effective or not, but was intended to bring some sort of equity or some sort of balancing,
right,
is the merit pushback. It's the, hey, this is America. We can all work hard. We can all do our best. And whoever has the most merit wins. It's kind of like that. So why should I have to give somebody a head start to first base? That's the pushback that I hear a lot. And I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to that perspective. I know I have one, but like what's your...
Do you want to speak to that perspective?
Can you, because that isn't
not
that
trying to be right here.
isn't that the core of the contention though? It's right there.
It is. And my biggest frustration with that is, yeah, okay, you said we're all in America, we all can work hard, but when I have to start here and you start way up there, where's that and how is that fair? I'm not saying people don't need to work hard, but we have to look at how the system has been set up. And it wasn't set up for me. It was not set up for someone like me. And so I have to work twice as hard to look half as good as someone that the system was set up for. And so where's the merit in that?
Right. Well, and you know, when you the other thing that I hear in addition to the merit thing is, well, even if there was like this inequity, it was like so long ago. Like it was way back then. Well, you're sharing a contemporary example of how you experience it on a daily basis. I was mentioning to Jen, I recently have been doing kind of a study. I'm a history buff, love it. But the Reconstruction era of U.S. history is fascinating as it relates to this, because it's obviously the period of time right after the Civil War, where there's like, okay, it's 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment's passed. It's like giving sort of equal access, you know, rights are being bestowed on formerly enslaved people, all that kind of stuff. Interestingly to me is that some of the same arguments against those steps were being made by white people right after the Civil War. So it hasn't been a long time. It's like an hour and a half since Civil War happened. And now, but the pushback is, you should be able, like, I'm not giving you that land. That belongs to me. You should have to work for it. You should have to, you know, learn yourself, and you should have to, like, this merit-based stuff, while this system, to your point, was built for hundreds of years to actually oppress those people. And that now, by some fiat or by a wave of a wand, that is mysteriously supposed to not exist anymore.
Right.
Seems so ridiculous. And to hear a modern person say, well, yeah, but that was so long ago. And then hear quotes from white Americans from 1868 or 1869, right after the war, saying the exact same thing. That was so long ago. It's like, wait a minute. No, it wasn't. And that argument seems so shallow and not actually informed by history to me. But to your point, as you are talking, because you are a very compassionate person. I know you to be a compassionate, loving person. And so much about our relationship. Yeah, I'm with you. God's still working on me. I get it.
Work in progress.
But you are basically describing this wanting to create conversations with people where there's like a trust bridge or something. There's like a love context to be able to have exchange, a meaningful exchange, not get hung up on our own selfishness, but somehow outside of that, and saying, no, I'm turning my back on that, and I want to be oriented differently.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person who's listening that says, okay, I want to incline my heart to openness. I want to be a loving person. I realize I don't have the same perspective as everyone else. Maybe I don't know what I don't know. What do you say to that person that wants to maybe make a meaningful change and make a meaningful difference in the life of someone that they know or love, or maybe even systemically or culturally? What can be done for that person that's like, you know, maybe I need to have a different perspective?
I think first they have to be honest with themselves, as far as looking in the mirror and seeing where. I'll say this. Right is right and wrong is wrong. I don't care what color you are. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And I think people have to stop saying, yeah, that was wrong, but. Or, well, he deserved that because. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. And I think for the person who wants to have these conversations, I think you have to come with a palms open attitude. Like, here's what I know. Here's what I think. Help me to understand your perspective. I'll help you. I'll explain my perspective, but it's not to attack. It's just to understand. If you want to understand, you have to come palms open with a loving space to create that. And it's intentional. You can't just find some rando on the street and be like, let me pour my heart to you. It takes work, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's not going to feel good sometimes. And people tend to get uncomfortable when things aren't geared towards them. And so when you find yourself in that place, probably where you need to be, because it's not going to be comfortable. So
yeah, I don't even think every call I've ever made to you has been comfortable for me, because I have but I have an awareness that I don't know what I don't know. Like, even as you guys are sitting here talking like the history and the whatever, I'm like, whoa. And I know that drives Marcus, because Marcus is kind of a reformer, and he's like, I want to see this systemically changed.
Yeah.
I want the world to look different. And for me, there's something in my heart that says all people matter the same. And perhaps that comes from my biblical worldview and my faith. That's like, I really wrestle with this bias and this prejudice, because I'm like, as a Christian, as someone who follows Christ and knows what he values, I don't even understand how we can think someone of a different color doesn't deserve what I deserve. It's like, it rocks me to the core.
And again, like, one thing I've always struggled with, because if we look back, Christianity was used to keep slaves in place. And so a lot of Christians will use that mentality of, well, God's okay with it. We teach it in our Bible. It was used against Black people to keep them in place. And it amazes me how, when we talk about history, like, some people listening probably who don't know who the person Emmett Till is or what happened in Tulsa. It's those type of things. And I've come across people today, they're like, who was that? That's our history.
Yeah.
So if we don't know our history, again, if we don't know our history, we turn a blind eye to it, and if we continue to just wash it as like it was no big deal, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We have to acknowledge. You have to look at it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it is, you mentioned, like, how can this change occur? What can the conversations look like? You do. Part of why I reach out to you so often is I sometimes don't like what my current photos of the community that I'm in look like, because I'm like, oh my gosh, we all look the same. That's not heaven. And while I understand there's going to be brokenness, and there is not going to be perfection, and the world is not going to look like it should be this side of heaven, I believe I am on this earth to get it, to help get it there. And so I'm like, oh, and so you actually have to, I think, have awareness and then desire. I don't know if everyone really desires it.
That's what I mean when you have to be honest with yourself. You have to look at it and be like, is this really a desire?
I want it to be different. And I think another thing that occurred to me, and we'll just touch on this a second, because we're kind of, the conversation is history and Jesus and the church kind of all coming together here at the end of this conversation. But I recently attended a church that is super diverse. I mean, with the color brown, every shade of brown, every shade of brown was represented at this church. And it was me and the kids. Marcus was out of town, and we went to go hear a friend speak, and it was so good. It was like so good. And like, wow, I loved it. God was there. It was alive. The people were great. It was so good. And I remember leaving and my kids saying, we should bring Dad back to this place. This is awesome. We should check it out again. And I remember in my mind saying to myself, not to my kids, because I don't want to transfer this mindset onto them. I'm trying to teach them another way. I thought, I don't know if we belong here. we talked about this
Mm-hmm.
over the phone, and you said, and why is that? And I said, well, we probably were the only like white family in the room. Very diverse, but diversely brown. And you said, okay. And I said, like there was no one on the platform that was like, everybody was a shade of brown.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, and so that made you uncomfortable. I said, oh no, I felt like I could go there if I want to. I just wasn't sure if we would connect. And you said, okay. And why is that? Why do you think you could go there if you want to? And without even thinking about it, I'm like, well, because I'm white.
Mm-hmm.
I am aware, and I don't know that this is common. I'm aware that as a white person, I'm not afraid to go too many places.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm not going to be accepted. I had no doubt that I was like, oh, I mean, I can go here if I want to go here.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know, like, I don't know if we'll make good friends, because where roles reversed, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you'd even feel comfortable walking in a room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but it was so interesting to be in that position and have those thoughts and not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
But then also just like, which also caused me to go, oh my goodness, American church, we have got to look different so that all people feel like they can belong, which was like, we have to give representation to all people so that when someone walks in the room, they feel like they could belong there.
And I think that's what sparked our conversation, is like the way you felt that Sunday at church is the way I walk through life.
Yeah.
And so very aware of what's for me. Where do I belong? Do I belong
What's for
here?
me?
So
What's for me? And do I belong here in a pretty white world?
Mm-hmm.
Or country, shall I say.
So here's what one of the things that's kicking around in my head as you're both kind of talking about this, is that, because I agree with 100% of what you said.
Sure.
That the Bible has been used to bandy about people's political perspectives on one side or the other
Mm-hmm.
for a couple thousand years, near as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
All the while, often through all of the smoke and haze and everything else, missing the elemental heart of the message of Jesus, which was the guy that was wanting us to go into the highways and hedges and compel people to come in so that his house could be full.
Mm-hmm.
And what his house looks like is an every nation, tribe, and tongue house.
Yep.
So whatever you espouse Christ as your savior, you're going to be in heaven one day in an every nation, tribe, and tongue location.
Yep.
And if you're not already, you're going to be like really learning a foreign language in more ways than one when you get to heaven, if we haven't actually learned the heart of Christ. He was always a leave the majority and find the minority God.
Mm-hmm.
He leave the 99 for the one.
Yep.
And so in a lot, but you know what that takes is, it takes you and me taking our eyes off of ourself.
Correct.
Mine, no, get off my lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And being people that build a bridge of love and let Jesus walk across.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, as much as I grieve the inequities of our world, I don't even have to step into a place of self-shaming as though I did that necessarily. I have my own sin I have to reconcile and repent of and get forgiven of. Yeah. It's not about that. And I think people get hung up on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just simply about, can I begin to look at people, every person, the way that Jesus looks at them?
Right.
And am I an every nation, tribe, and tongue person?
Mm-hmm.
Am I a leave the 99 in my safe little comfort of all the things that I already know and go get the one who doesn't feel like they did? And be that kind of person. I am convinced you can't live a truly significant life unless you get over yourself that much. Yep. And what I really appreciate about you, Courtney, is that you are willing to wade into the conversation openly and honestly with people like me and Jen.
Yeah, always.
Who are and be able to have the kind of conversation that sometimes says, I think we all have our opinions and perspectives. I think I know, but I might be wrong. Might be wrong. And help me understand where you're coming from. Tell me more about that, so that we can walk with more empathy, with more gentleness of heart. And you have exemplified that in my life. And it's one of the reasons why we've got 20 years of walking together.
Yeah.
Because it's just freaking real, and it's meaningful, and it's Jesus centered, the real guy. And so thank you for being that kind of a person, and for helping us have maybe a fresh perspective on this. So
yeah. So
thank
as we
you.
close it out,
Thank
what would
you.
be your last thought that you want to leave with us here?
I would say humble yourselves and start the conversation with the intent of understanding, not with, well, let me tell you while I'm right. So, and do it in love. Do it in love.
Well, thank you guys for being with us today. Thank you, Courtney, for joining us on this episode.
Thank you.
And we appreciate that. We will put more info in the show notes of how you can even, check out more of what Courtney's doing, follow her. But let's have more of this conversation. That's exactly right. Because this isn't a one and done. We want to be people who are about having this kind of warm-hearted, soft-hearted conversation with one another, who build a bridge of love and let Jesus walk across that. And in so doing, live the significant life He's called us to live. So until next time, thanks for joining us.